My older brother invited me to an exclusive $500 a plate celebratory dinner, only to humiliate me by seating me at a sticky children's table while my married siblings sat with the adults. I left silently, canceled his access to the family trust, and watched the panic unfold. This is where the story truly begins, and the fallout is something you have to see to believe. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The notification on my phone screen didn't just wake me up. It jolted me out of the first deep sleep I'd managed in 48 hours. I was lying in a hotel room in Shanghai, the blackout curtains drawn tight against the mid-afternoon sun, my body still convinced it was 3:00 a.m. back in Chicago. My head throbbed with the dull, persistent ache of jet lag and the lingering stress of a supply chain negotiation that had nearly collapsed 3 times in the last week. I was physically depleted, my voice raspy from hours of conference calls, and my patience worn down to a dangerously thin wire. I reached for the phone, squinting against the blue light. It was a group text. Family excellence dinner mandatory. The sender was Benjamin. Of course it was Benjamin. My older brother didn't send requests, he sent summons. He was 35, handsome in that polished, politician sort of way, and completely convinced that the sun rose and set specifically to illuminate his achievements. The text was followed by a flurry of emojis, champagne bottles, fireworks, and stacks of cash. Big news, he wrote. The biggest, I'm finally launching the venture. Dinner at Latoit next Saturday, 7 p.m. sharp. Dress code, black tie, no excuses. This is the start of the empire. I dropped the phone back onto the duvet and rubbed my temples. The venture. He always capitalized it in his texts, as if it were a proper noun, a holy entity. For the last 6 months, Benjamin had been vague but boastful about this new business idea, claiming it was going to revolutionize logistics. He had no background in logistics, I did, but whenever I tried to ask him about the specifics, he would wave a hand dismissively and say, "It's big picture stuff, Delilah. You wouldn't get the vision, you're too focused on the details." I was too focused on the details because the details were my job. As a senior supply chain director for one of the largest manufacturing firms in the Midwest, my entire life was details. I managed millions of dollars in inventory, navigated international trade laws, and solved crises that could bankrupt smaller companies. But to Benjamin, and sadly to the rest of my family, my career was just a job. It was something I did to pass the time until I achieved the only milestone that actually mattered in their eyes, marriage. I typed back, my fingers sluggish. I land Friday night, I'll be there. Congratulations, Ben. I didn't want to go. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to claim exhaustion, to say my flight was delayed, to stay in my apartment and order takeout. But the mandatory part wasn't a joke. In our family, missing a milestone event for the golden child was tantamount to treason. And right now, I was too tired to fight a war. I just wanted to survive the dinner, smile at his toast, and go home to sleep for a week. But as I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling of a hotel room 7,000 miles from home, a cold knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't just annoyance, it was dread. There was something frantic about Benjamin's recent behavior, a manic edge to his boasting that usually preceded a crash. He had always been the dreamer, the one with the million-dollar ideas that usually cost our parents $20,000 to fix. This time, though, felt different. The venue, Latoit, was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. It was exclusive, pretentious, and completely out of Benjamin's usual price range, unless, of course, he had finally found an investor, or unless he was spending money he didn't technically have yet. I closed my eyes, trying to drift back into sleep, but the anxiety pricked at me. I had a feeling that this dinner wasn't just a celebration. It was a stage. And in Benjamin's theater, there were only 2 roles, the star and the audience who applauded him. I just prayed I wouldn't be dragged on stage to clean up the mess when the curtain fell. The betrayal, when it arrived, wouldn't be a sudden knife in the back. It would be a slow, humiliating public execution, and it would hurt worse than the exhaustion, worse than the jet lag, because it would confirm the one thing I had spent my entire adult life trying to disprove. That to them, I was nothing more than a prop. The flight back was a nightmare of turbulence and crying infants, leaving me feeling less like a human woman and more like a bag of laundry that had been tumbled on the heavy-duty cycle for 14 hours. By the time Saturday evening arrived, I had managed to shower, apply enough concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and squeeze into a navy blue silk gown that I usually saved for corporate galas. I looked in the mirror. I looked successful. I looked composed. I looked like Delilah, the woman who commanded boardrooms. But as I grabbed my clutch and headed out the door, I felt that familiar regression taking hold. It happens to everyone when they visit their parents or siblings, the reversion to the childhood version of yourself. To the world, I was a director. To them, I was just Dee, the little sister who hadn't managed to lock down a husband yet. Latoit was located on the rooftop of a downtown skyscraper. The elevator ride up made my ears pop. When the doors opened, the noise hit me instantly. The clinking of crystal, the murmur of expensive conversation, the low thrum of jazz. The air smelled of truffle oil and money. I spotted them immediately. Benjamin had secured the prime spot, a semi-private area raised on a platform near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. He was standing at the head of the arrangement, holding a glass of scotch, laughing loudly at something our father said. He looked immaculate in a tuxedo that I suspected was new. Beside him was his wife, Addison. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that looked like it cost more than my car. Addison had always been difficult. She was the kind of woman who used politeness as a weapon. Her compliments were always backhanded, her concern always laced with judgment. She spotted me approaching and her smile tightened just a fraction. "Delilah, you made it," Benjamin boomed, waving me over. He didn't hug me, he just gestured to the space around him as if he owned the building. "Look at this view. Only the best for the launch, right?" "It's incredible, Ben," I said, forcing a smile. "Congratulations, the place is beautiful." "It's 500 ahead," he whispered loudly, winking. "But don't worry about it, the company covers it. The future is bright, D." I looked around the group. My parents were there, beaming with pride. My younger brother, Caleb, and his wife were there, too. Caleb is 5 years younger than me, 26, and a junior accountant. He's a sweet kid, but he's never had an original thought in his life. He married his high school sweetheart right out of college, and because of that, he was considered settled and mature in the family hierarchy. "Okay, everyone, take your seats." Addison clapped her hands, taking charge. "We have a strict schedule for the tasting menu." I moved toward the large, oval table in the center of the platform. It was beautifully set with white linens, tall candles, and floral centerpieces. There were 8 chairs. I did a quick head count. Mom, Dad, Benjamin, Addison, Caleb, Caleb's wife. That was 6. Plus me, 7. There was plenty of room. I reached for the chair next to my mother, but Addison's hand shot out, her manicured nails resting gently on my arm. "Oh no, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet condescension. "That's not your seat." I paused, confused. "What, oh, is there a seating chart?" "Yes, of course," Addison said, laughing lightly as if I'd asked if the sky was blue. "We wanted to keep the couples together, to keep the conversation flowing. Adult talk." I blinked. I can converse like an adult, Addison." "Oh, stop, you know what I mean," she said, dismissing me with a wave. "It's just better this way, we put you over there." She pointed. I followed her finger. In the corner of the semi-private area, tucked away near the service station where the waiters stacked dirty dishes, was a small, square folding table. It was lower than the main table. It didn't have a tablecloth, just a placemat. Seated at it were Addison's 2 children, my nieces, aged 4 and 6. They were currently banging their silverware on the table. There was one empty chair squeezed in between them. It was a child-sized chair. I stared at the table. Then I stared back at the main table. There were clearly empty spots at the main table. They had actually removed a chair to make it an even 6. "You want me to sit at the kids' table?" I asked, my voice flat. "It's not a kids' table," Benjamin interjected, laughing nervously. It's just the overflow annex. Look, D, there wasn't enough room at the main setup for an odd number. It throws off the symmetry for the photos. Addison wanted everything perfect for the Instagram launch. Symmetry, I repeated. Plus, Addison added, leaning in, the girls love you, you're the cool aunt. You can help them cut their chicken. We ordered them chicken fingers, and I figured since you're picky, you might prefer that to the foie gras anyway. I'm not picky, I have a sophisticated palate. I take clients to dinners like this twice a week. I looked at Caleb. He was already seated, pouring wine for his wife. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew this was wrong, but he wouldn't speak up. He was at the big table. He had made the cut. Ben, I said quietly, Caleb is here, he's sitting with you. Caleb is married, Delilah, Benjamin said, his tone shifting from jovial to annoyed. He's part of a unit. You're solo. It just made sense logistically. Don't make a scene. This is my night. Logistically. He used the word like a weapon, oblivious to the fact that logistics was the air I breathed. I felt a heat rising up my neck. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a profound, aching clarity. I looked at the main table, the adults' table. My parents, who I sent a check to every month to help with their mortgage. Benjamin, whose ventures I had quietly bylaid out 3 times in the last 5 years. Caleb, whose college tuition I had contributed to. They were all sitting there, comfortable in the luxury I helped sustain, while I was being relegated to the corner to babysit because I didn't have a ring on my finger. I looked at Benjamin. He was adjusting his cufflinks, preening. He thought he was the king of the world tonight. He thought he held all the cards because he was wearing a tuxedo and hosting a dinner. But as I looked at the kids' table and then back at him, I realized something terrifyingly calm. Benjamin had forgotten one crucial thing. He had forgotten who the trustee was. He had forgotten that the family trust he was dipping into for this venture wasn't a bottomless pit, and more importantly, it wasn't his to control. It was mine. To understand why this moment shattered me, you have to understand the history. I haven't just been a sister to Benjamin. I've been his safety net, his fixer, and his silent partner for a decade. When Benjamin was 25 and got sued for a breach of contract on a guaranteed real estate flip, I was the one who found him a lawyer. I paid the retainer. When he needed a down payment for his first house because his credit score was in the trash, I loaned him the money, a loan he has never mentioned repayment for in 7 years. I did it because we were family. I did it because our parents always told me, Benjamin is a visionary, Delilah. He just needs a little runway to take off. You're the steady one. You can afford to help him. I internalized that. I was the steady one, the boring one, the ATM, but the real architect of my misery wasn't just Benjamin's entitlement, it was Addison. Addison came from a family that valued appearances over oxygen. She had never worked a day in her life, transitioning seamlessly from her father's credit card to Benjamin's. Well, to Benjamin's debt. She was a lifestyle curator, which apparently meant posting photos of coffee and judging people. Addison had always resented me. I think it bothered her that I made my own money. She couldn't attack my success directly, so she attacked my womanhood. She made constant, snippy remarks about my masculine energy because I was assertive or my sad apartment because it didn't have a nursery. Tonight, she was glowing. She stood up to make a pre-dinner announcement, clinking a spoon against her glass. Everyone, thank you for coming, she trilled, her voice pitching high. Tonight is about Benjamin, of course, but it's also about the future. We are so proud to announce that the venture is officially launching and... She paused for dramatic effect. We are looking at summer homes in the Hamptons. My parents clapped wildly. Caleb cheered. I stood by the kids' table, feeling like a ghost. The Hamptons. Benjamin didn't have Hamptons money. The trust fund our grandfather left us was substantial, but it was strictly regulated. It was designed for emergencies, education, and approved business investments. I was the trustee. I was the one who approved the withdrawals. Suddenly, it clicked. The venture. 2 weeks ago, Benjamin had sent me a chaotic proposal for a dropshipping business. It was riddled with holes. I had sent it back with notes, telling him it wasn't ready for funding. I hadn't approved a dime. So how was he paying for this dinner? How was he looking at summer homes? I watched him lean over to Addison and whisper, "Don't worry, once the trust release goes through next week, we're golden." He hadn't secured the funding. He was spending the money before I had approved it, assuming that I would just rubber stamp it like I always did. He was banking on my passivity. He was banking on D the doormat. Addison looked over at me, her eyes glinting with malice. She noticed I hadn't sat down in the tiny chair yet. "Delilah, sit down, you're hovering," she snapped, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "You're blocking the view of the skyline, and could you please cut Sophie's meat? She's struggling." That was the moment. It wasn't the chair. It wasn't the children. I love my nieces. It was the casual, public reduction of my existence to a servant. "Actually," Addison continued, smiling at her friends at the next table, "it's good practice for you, Dee. Maybe if you learn to be a little more domestic, you won't be attending these things alone forever." The table went silent. Even Caleb looked down at his plate, embarrassed. My mother took a sip of wine, pretending she hadn't heard. Benjamin just smirked, enjoying the show. They expected me to blush. They expected me to stammer, sit down in the tiny chair, pick up the plastic fork, and cut the chicken fingers. They expected me to take the scrap of dignity they offered and be grateful for it. I looked at the sticky table. I looked at the adults' table. I felt the exhaustion from the flight evaporate, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. It was the same focus I used when I had to fire a negligent vendor or shut down a failing distribution center. I wasn't a sister anymore. I wasn't a daughter. I was the trustee, and I was about to close the account. The silence at the table stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the clinking of silverware from the neighboring tables. Addison's smirk hadn't faded. It had just frozen in place, waiting for my capitulation. Benjamin was watching me with that familiar mix of impatience and condescension, like I was a stubborn child refusing to eat my vegetables. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a surge of adrenaline so potent it felt electric. I looked down at the tiny plastic chair. Then I looked at the waiters approaching with the first course, tuna tartare for the adults, and a basket of fries for the kids' table. I didn't sit down. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and carrying just enough to reach their ears without causing a scene for the other patrons, "I don't think I'll be staying for dinner." Benjamin's brows furrowed. "What? Don't be dramatic, Delilah. Sit down." "I'm not being dramatic, Ben. I'm being logical," I said, a slight smile touching my lips. "The seating chart is clear. You have your unit. I have. Well, I have a flight to catch up on." "You just got here," my mother hissed, looking around nervously. "People are watching." "Let them watch," I said, slinging my purse over my shoulder. "Enjoy the launch. It looks expensive." I turned on my heel and walked away. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman leaving a bad business meeting. "Delilah, get back here." Benjamin's voice rose, cracking slightly. "We have to take photos." I kept walking. I heard Addison mutter something about me being ungrateful and always ruining everything, but the words bounced off my back like pebbles against a tank. The moment the elevator doors closed, shutting out the noise of the restaurant and the sight of my family, I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. First, I called my assistant, Sarah. It was Saturday night, but she picked up on the second ring. "Dee, is everything okay? You just landed." "I need you to log into the Family Trust portal immediately," I said, my voice clipped. "Freeze all pending transactions. Flag the account for suspicious activity. Specifically, any withdrawal requests from Benjamin or Addison in the last 48 hours. "Got it," Sarah said, typing in the background. "Suspicious activity. Do you want me to alert the bank?" "Yes, tell them the trustee, me, is initiating an audit, effective immediately. No funds go out without my direct, written authorization, and revoke Benjamin's emergency access card. Today." "Done," she said. "Anything else?" "Yes, call the property manager for the lake house. Tell him the locks are being changed tomorrow morning. Benjamin is not to be given a key." I hung up as the elevator dinged on the ground floor. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in years, I breathed freely. I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The best steakhouse in the city," I said, "for one." Sitting in the back of the cab, I opened my laptop. The venture. I pulled up the proposal Benjamin had sent me weeks ago. It was a mess of buzzwords and projected earnings based on nothing. But then I noticed something I had missed before. In the fine print of his investor deck, he listed a secured line of credit backed by the family trust. He hadn't just planned to use the money, he had already leveraged it. He had taken out a high-interest loan against the trust assets, assuming I would approve the transfer to cover it before the first payment was due. If I froze the trust, he wouldn't just be embarrassed, he would be in default. And the loan sharks he was dealing with, predatory lenders with names like Quick Capital, didn't care about family drama. He had built a castle on a foundation of sand, and I had just turned on the hose. I was halfway through a perfectly cooked ribeye and a glass of actual vintage Cabernet when my phone started to vibrate. It buzzed once, twice, then continuously, dancing across the white tablecloth like an angry beetle. I glanced at the screen. Benjamin, 12 missed calls. Mom, 5 missed calls. Caleb, 3 missed calls. Addison, 1 text. I silenced it and flipped it face down. I finished my steak. I ordered the chocolate lava cake. I savored every bite, imagining the scene back at Latoit. When the bill came, I paid with my own card, the one attached to my salary, not the trust. As I walked out of the restaurant, I finally checked the messages. Addison's text, "You are so selfish. Ruining Ben's big night because you can't handle not being the center of attention. Grow up." Benjamin's voicemail was next. I put the phone to my ear. "Delilah, where the hell did you go? The waiter just brought the bill for the appetizers and, look, my card was declined. The company card. It says refer to issuer. You need to call the bank. Now, it's embarrassing, fix it." I smiled. The company card was the emergency credit card linked to the trust. I had revoked it 30 minutes ago. I didn't call him back. Instead, I texted him a screenshot. It was a notification from the trust management software. Alert, unauthorized access attempt blocked. Account frozen pending audit. I added a simple caption, "Enjoy the kids' menu. It's on me. The rest is on you." 10 minutes later, I was back in my apartment, changing into sweatpants when my buzzer rang. It was Benjamin. I ignored it. He rang again, long and insistent. Then my phone rang. "Delilah, let me in." He was screaming into the phone. "The valet won't give me my car. They said the payment for the parking didn't go through either." "That sounds like a logistical problem, Ben," I said, putting him on speaker while I poured a glass of water. "I thought you were the big picture guy." "Don't give me that corporate crap. What did you do to the accounts?" The waiter threatened to call the police. Mom and Dad had to scrape together cash to pay the bill. Addison is crying in the bathroom. "You seated the trustee at the children's table, Benjamin," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You treated the person who controls your finances like a servant. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" "It was a joke. It was just a seating arrangement. Why are you so sensitive?" "It wasn't a joke. It was a statement," I countered. "And so is this. The trust is for legitimate business ventures and family emergencies. Dinner at Latoit is neither. And that loan you took out against the assets, the one you didn't tell me about." Silence. "Yeah," I said. "I saw the paperwork. That's fraud, Ben. Attempted fraud against the trust. As trustee, I have a fiduciary duty to protect the assets, even from you. You can't do this. I have investors coming next week. I need that liquidity." "You have predatory lenders coming next week," I corrected. "And you don't have liquidity. You have a frozen account and a lot of explaining to do." "I'll tell Mom and Dad." He threatened, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "I'll tell them you're stealing the money." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them, then tell them why the money is gone. Tell them about the loan. Tell them about the gambling debts from last year that I covered and didn't tell them about. Go ahead, Ben, let's have that conversation." He sputtered, incoherent rage filling the line. You have until Monday morning to present a repayment plan for the unauthorized credit usage, I said calmly. Or I report the fraud to the board. And Ben happy launch. I hung up and disconnected the buzzer. Sunday was a barrage of emotional warfare. My mother called, weeping, saying I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. My father left a stern voicemail demanding I stop this nonsense and apologize to your brother. They didn't know the truth. They only knew Benjamin's version, that I was a jealous, vindictive spinster who threw a tantrum because I didn't get a good seat. I spent the day building my case. I pulled every bank statement from the last 5 years. I itemized every loan Benjamin had never repaid. I found the emails where he pressured me to release funds for emergency medical bills that turned out to be a trip to Vegas. It was worse than I thought. He had been bleeding the trust dry in small, unnoticeable increments for years. Addison's lifestyle wasn't funded by his success, it was funded by my negligence. I had been so busy with my own career, so desperate to keep the peace, that I had let them rob us blind. By Monday morning, I had a dossier thick enough to choke a horse. I went to work early. At 10:00 a.m., Benjamin stormed into my office building. Security stopped him in the lobby, but he made enough noise that my assistant called me. He's demanding to see you, Delilah. He says it's a family emergency. Send him up, I said, but have security escort him. And leave the door open. When Benjamin walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He slammed a folder onto my desk. You've frozen everything. The contractors for the house renovation walked off the job this morning. My car is being repossessed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've done my job, I said, not looking up from my monitor. I'm protecting the principal. It's our money. Granddad left it for all of us. He left it in a trust, Ben with me as the executor. Do you know why? Because he knew you couldn't handle money. He knew you'd spend it on flash and validation. I'm going to sue you, he spat. I've already talked to a lawyer. We're going to remove you as trustee for breach of duty. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. A lawyer? With what money, Ben? You can't even pay for parking. I swiveled my chair around and picked up the dossier I had compiled. But if you want to bring lawyers into this, let's look at the evidence. Here's a record of every withdrawal you've made. Here are the falsified invoices you submitted for the startup costs of your last 3 failed businesses. And here, I pulled out a specific document, is the loan application where you forged my signature as a cosigner. His face went pale, the bluster vanished, replaced by genuine fear. You found that. Yes, that's a felony, bank fraud, identity theft. If I hand this to the police, you don't just lose the money, you go to prison. He slumped into the chair opposite my desk, the client chair. He looked small. I needed it, he whispered. Addison, she has expectations, the launch, it had to be perfect. I was going to pay it back. The venture is going to work. The venture is a pyramid scheme, Ben, I said gently but firmly. I had our analysts look at it. It's not a business. It's a way to lose money fast. So what now? He asked, his voice trembling. Are you going to send me to jail? That depends, I said. I'm willing to keep this out of the courts, but there are conditions, serious ones. Anything, he said. Please, Dee, I can't go to jail. Addison would leave me. First, I said, ticking off a finger, you resign from any role in the family finances, permanently. Second, you and Addison move out of the lake house. We're selling it to replenish the trust. Third, you get a job, a real job, not a venture. I can get you an interview in our warehouse, entry level, logistics. He stared at me horrified. Warehouse, I'm an entrepreneur. No, I said, you're an unemployed fraudster. Those are the terms, take them or leave them. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from social media. Addison had posted a long, rambling video on Instagram, crying about how her cruel sister-in-law had cut them off out of jealousy and ruined their lives. She was tagging my company. She was tagging my clients. I turned the screen to Benjamin. And one more thing, I said, my voice turning to ice. You're going to fix this. Publicly. The video was viral within hours. Addison, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face, painted me as a monster who hoarded family wealth while her visionary husband suffered. Strangers were leaving comments calling me greedy, bitter, and jealous. My work email started pinging with confused messages from colleagues. This wasn't just a tantrum anymore. It was an attempt to dismantle my professional reputation. I didn't respond online. I didn't comment. Instead, I sent a single text to the family group chat. Emergency meeting. Sunday, 1 p.m., Mom and Dad's house. Attendance mandatory. Sunday arrived with a heavy, overcast sky. My parents' living room felt like a courtroom. My mother was wringing her hands on the sofa. My father sat in his armchair, looking grim. Caleb and his wife were there, silent and pale. Benjamin and Addison sat together on the love seat, Addison still playing the victim, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. I walked in last. I carried a single file box. I set it on the coffee table with a heavy thud. Delilah, my mother started, her voice trembling. We need to stop this. You can't just cut your brother off like this. It's cruel. It's necessary, I said, my voice steady. And today, you're going to see why. Addison scoffed. Oh, here we go, the spreadsheet queen. What are you going to bill us for Christmas dinner next? I ignored her. I opened the box and took out a stack of papers. I handed the first one to my father. This, I said, pointing to the document, is the trust ledger, the real one. Not the summaries Benjamin has been showing you. My father put on his reading glasses. He frowned. What is this? Withdrawal, $50,000. Consulting fees. That was for Benjamin's crypto investment last year, I said. It went to zero in 3 weeks. And this, my father pointed to another line, $75,000, office renovation. That was for the new pool at your house, Addison, I said, turning to her. The one you told Mom and Dad was a gift from your parents. Addison went white. Benjamin tried to grab the paper, but my father pulled it away. Is this true? My father asked, his voice low and dangerous. It was an investment in our lifestyle. Addison shrieked. You have to spend money to make connections. And this, I continued, pulling out the piece de resistance, is the loan application for the venture. Notice the signature at the bottom. My father squinted. That's your signature, Delilah. No, I said. That's a forgery. Benjamin signed my name to secure a high-interest loan against the trust assets, without my knowledge, without my consent. The room went deadly silent. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. Caleb looked at Benjamin with pure shock. Ben, my father asked, his voice breaking, Did you sign your sister's name? Benjamin looked at the floor. He looked at Addison. He looked at me. I was going to pay it back. The venture is going to be huge. It's fraud, Dad, I said softly. It's a felony. And the only reason the police aren't here right now is because I stopped the transaction before the funds were released. My father stood up. He walked over to Benjamin. For the first time in my life, I saw the disappointment in his eyes directed entirely at his golden son. You stole from us, my father said. You lied to us, and you tried to ruin your sister's life because she wouldn't let you keep doing it. Addison stood up, her face twisted in ugly rage. This is ridiculous. He's an entrepreneur. You just don't understand vision. And you, she pointed a shaking finger at me, you're just jealous because you'll never have what we have. What you have, I said calmly, is debt, and a criminal record if you don't shut up. I turned to Benjamin. Here are the terms. You sign over your interest in the trust to repay the debts you've incurred. You publicly retract every lie Addison posted. And you, I looked at Addison, you delete that video, now, and you post an apology, or I file the police report for the forgery. Addison looked at Benjamin, expecting him to fight, but Benjamin was defeated. The facade had cracked. He looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw the panic in her eyes not for him, but for the lifestyle she was losing. Do it, Addison, Benjamin whispered. What? She screeched. Delete it, he said, his voice gaining a shred of strength. Delete the video, we can't go to jail. Addison stared at him, betrayed. Then she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling with rage, and deleted the post. And the apology, I reminded her. She typed it out, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. I was mistaken. Delilah has been nothing but supportive. The previous post was made in error. It was weak, but it was public. My father looked at me. Delilah, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. But you know now, I'm the trustee for a reason, and from now on we play by my rules. Benjamin and Addison lost the lake house. It was sold to cover the outstanding debts and replenish the trust fund. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, a significant downgrade from their curated lifestyle. Benjamin took the job in the warehouse. He hated it at first, but stripping away the pretense of being a CEO actually seemed to ground him. For the first time, he was earning his own money. He was tired, yes, but he wasn't lying to anyone. Addison didn't handle the transition as well. Without the funds to maintain her image, her social circle evaporated. She eventually got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. We don't speak much, but the venom in her eyes has been replaced by a quiet, simmering resentment that I can live with. As for me, I didn't just go back to work, I thrived. The clarity I gained that night at Latoit extended to every part of my life. I stopped apologizing for my success. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into boxes others made for me. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner. It was at a small, intimate bistro, not flashy, but excellent food. I invited my parents, Caleb, and even Benjamin. We sat at a round table, no head of the table, no kids' table, just family. Benjamin looked different. He was thinner, less polished, but more real. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo, he was wearing a button-down shirt from a department store. When the check came, my father reached for it, but Benjamin stopped him. "No, Dad," he said, pulling out a debit card. "I got this one. It's not much, but I earned it." He looked at me then. It wasn't a look of adoration or even total forgiveness. It was respect. "Thanks, Dee," he said quietly. "You're welcome, Ben," I replied, raising my glass. I walked home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. The trust was secure. My family was healing, albeit slowly and with scars. And I realized that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to stop enabling the people you love and force them to grow up. I never did find out what happened to that specific table at Latoit. But I like to think that somewhere, in a corner of a fancy restaurant, there's a little plastic chair waiting for someone else to make a choice. A choice to sit down and accept their place, or to stand up and walk away into a life they actually own.